Unabashed.
The most unpredictable.
Becomes a headline.
The most volatile.
Outrageous behavior.
Unsubstantiated narratives. A battle of personalities.
Hi, and welcome to Grand Tamasha. I'm your host, Milan. As you know, we've been on hiatus since June, so to kick off our new season, and as a reward to our loyal listeners, we have a special bonus episode this week, my interview with Carnegie expert Christophe Jaffrelot on the causes and consequences of India's 2019 general election. We hope you enjoy it. Christophe is a man who is in multiple places at the same time. He is a senior research fellow at the Center for International Studies and Research at Sciences Po in Paris. He is a professor of Indian politics and sociology at the King's India Institute in London. And most importantly for us, he's a non-resident scholar with the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. It's an understatement to say he is one of the most distinguished scholars of South Asia anywhere on the planet. It's my pleasure to have him on the podcast for the very first time. Christophe, thanks for coming to the show.
Thank you.
I want to begin with the question that's on everyone's mind. I think it's a question that you've gotten a million times already, but it's a question that we keep coming back to, which is how did Narendra Modi manufacture a second consecutive single-party majority in the Lok Sabha? You have studied Indian politics up close and personal now for many decades. If you had to briefly summarize what you think was the quote-unquote magic formula for Modi and the BJP this time, what would be the ingredients?
Well, the first factor for this victory is the way Modi reinvented himself as the strong man India needed in the context of the jihadist attacks of Pulwama in February 2019. That was an attack that he could use for retaliations. He could order the attack of the Pakistani territory in a very audacious move. And that was certainly the main factor for shifting the debate from the socioeconomic issues, the economic situation, joblessness being one of these issues, to a security dimension. Security became the most important issue in India at that time. And it was, of course, very much helped by the media for developing a kind of, you can say, hysteria of nationalism. He was in a position to project himself. But he was in this position precisely because the context was conducive. The media did not ask the tough question, never. No press conference anyway. And the social media played a major role. And this role was also made possible because of the huge amount of money that the BJP has spent in this election. A record amount of something like $9 billion have been spent for the whole election, and BJP itself seems to have spent $3.4 billion, which is absolutely unprecedented. And that was made possible because of the new law that the BJP had passed, making possible to anybody to give anonymously money to the party. That is the famous law on the electoral bonds. So you have a campaign that is centered on a strong man, supported by a saturation of the public sphere. And on the other side, it's a very important ingredient of this victory. The institutions supposed to implement a moral code of conduct, the Election Commission of India, is weak, so weak that in the end, the Supreme Court will ask the Commission to do its job to no avail. And another factor of the same kind is the weakness this time of the opposition. The opposition could not give the fight that was necessary to beat Modi that time. To beat Modi that time, you needed a strong contender, a face. And the opposition was not that united and was not that aggressive, so the credibility of the opposition was not sufficient.
I want to quote something that Devesh Kapoor wrote in the Washington Post in the aftermath of the general election verdict. Devesh wrote, quote, that the old Nehruvian India is giving way and is being replaced by Modi's India, one that is less embarrassed by its limited English and its heavy accents. Its nationalism is unapologetic about India's Hindu roots, and it's prepared to be more assertive in defense of what it regards as its national interests, even if that means redefining the idea of the nation. Do you agree with the sentiment? Essentially, what he's saying is there was a mood against the elite, there's a growing assertiveness, and that assertiveness is manifestly pro-Hindu.
Yeah. In fact, these are the ingredients of what we call national populism. You have different forms of populism. You have a populism of the left that is there still in Europe, in Italy, in Greece, in Spain. And that is a legacy of Latin America, by the way. There is this idea that you need a strong man like Perón to redistribute. And you have national populism. That is different. The nation is made of the sons of the soil, of the majority, that has to be defended against the threats from inside, the minorities, the migrants, and the threats from outside, the enemies, or even the global forces. Well, Modi is clearly a national populist, which means that he is a populist. And to be a populist indeed means that you speak in the name of the people like the people. So this idea that you don't comment, that your command of English is not that great, is an asset. That you fight the elite, that you are of a different social background. You come from the plebeians. You are like us, is like us. So the fact that Modi, by the way, is a low caste person, come from one of the low caste groups, is a factor of this populism. But yes, it's national populism because it's in the name of the nation. It's in the name of the Hindu nation, fighting for its rights, fighting for against the threats which are posed to the nation by Muslims, but mostly Islamists, and even more clearly Pakistan. So that's why it was a perfect context for Modi that was created by Pulwama.
There's a lot of talk about what the BJP's agenda would be in its second term, and I want to ask you specifically about nationalism. The RSS and the Sangh Parivar is explicit about wanting to create a Hindu Rashtra. I know it seems like an odd question, but do you think the Prime Minister actually shares this objective? Many people say he's a very pragmatic politician. He's a very wily politician. He knows the limits of what the traffic can bear. If he shares this objective, what do you think it means to him? Because there again, people have different imaginations or ideas of what a Hindu Rashtra might be.
Well, we've seen over the last 5 years that many red lines have been crossed if we go by the standards of yesterday. And none of these red lines could have been crossed without his blessing, without even his active support. So what we may see is a continuation of the same trends, a clear recognition of the Hindu identity of the country. And we see this in many different domains. Education is a key domain. RSS has always emphasized the need to shape and reshape the psyche of the youth. They do that in their own organization, but to do it in the classroom is, of course, much more effective. So that's one very important component of the public policies. Universities, history textbooks will be transformed, will continue to be transformed according to their own ideology. Secondly, and this is where national populism leads to illiberal democracy. Since they represent the people, since they are the people, there is no need for any opposition. Congress-free India is one of the objectives. And there is no need for dissent. So the university system, the NGOs have to behave, and the media to some extent. We will see whether NDTV remains NDTV. So that's another dimension. There is the identity dimension, promotion of Hinduism and the Hindu view of history. And there is the, I would say, freedom-related dimension. And there's a third dimension that is, of course, what do we do with the minorities? And the minorities have already been at the receiving end. We've seen them ostracized, ghettoized, marginalized. And that will probably continue, and this is dangerous for the social cohesion of the country. But these three dimensions were there over the past 5 years. They will remain there, and it's a question of time. There's no need to hurry up, and I don't think Modi will be under a tremendous pressure because it's a work in progress, the Hindu Rashtra. It will take time. RSS is almost 100 years old. They have a millenarian view of history. India is eternal for them, so it can take many more years to achieve, to complete the project. The only caveat there is that what we've seen over the last few years is the mainstreamization of fringe elements which are more in a hurry. And that's a reflection of the dual quality of Hindu nationalism. There have always been two schools of thought. Naturam Godse, the man who killed Gandhi, left RSS and joined this school of thought, the other school of thought, led by Savarkar, precisely because he found that RSS was taking its time when things have to be made more quickly. And violence was a legitimate tool for that. Well, this school of thought that was at the periphery of the Sangh Parivar of the Hindutva forces is more represented today in the party apparatus. You can say it is represented by the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, Yogi Adityanath. It's also represented by some members of parliament, including Pragya Singh Thakur, who has been accused of being involved in some terrorist action. So again, the same question of do we need to resort to violence or not? So let's see whether these elements put some pressure on the Modi government and whether he can't live with this. He may contend them.
But what you're saying, or what's implicit in what you're saying, Christophe, is that there is a distinction between a de jure Hindu Rashtra and a de facto Hindu Rashtra. And many people are looking for signs that the government might amend the constitution, might revise the preamble, might change the constitutional status of Jammu and Kashmir. And if I'm understanding you correctly, your point is, while those may remain long-term goals of the movement, there are many things which could be done short of passing laws and short of amending the constitution, which are really about shaping social norms, patterns of behavior, and social relations. Is that an accurate summary?
Exactly. It's very much in tune with what RSS has always been about. RSS is not about state conquest. To conquer the state is only useful to make sure that the police is not interfering with your activities. But what is important is these activities. The activities RSS has at the grassroots level. It's a societal project. It's not a political, or at least a statist project. And in that sense, there is a difference between RSS and a fascist organization. For a fascist, to conquer the state is a priority. For the RSS, it's a long-term agenda, and if they can make people behave at the local level, at the grassroots level, this is what matters most. And it is more sustainable because the state apparatus can change. Power can shift from one end to the other. But society will remain. And if you are in charge of society, if you have crisscross society, if you are policing society, then it's forever.
One name you mentioned just a few minutes ago was that of Pragya Singh Thakur, who was the BJP candidate in Bhopal, who stands accused of on terrorism, very serious terrorism charges. you have argued elsewhere that her candidacy is important not just because Bhopal is a significant constituency and she was a sort of star campaigner, but that her candidacy is sort of a larger symbol that was meant to be sent or communicated across the country. How would you describe or encapsulate that symbol? What does it mean?
The symbol is, well, we dare. We dare to nominate someone who has such a tainted pedigree, and not against anybody, but against a symbol of Congress secularism. Digvijay Singh, who was the other contender, has been chief minister of Madhya Pradesh for 10 years, has defended the minorities always, the Dalits also, never forget this dimension. In 2000, he had this Dalit agenda in Madhya Pradesh. So the idea was to show that there is a clear choice now between those who claim that secularism is the DNA of India and those, us, who say, no, the real identity is on the other side. And not you can say center-right, but really far-right. It was also, of course, a symbol because that was in Bhopal, but that had repercussions across India. And I was in Bhopal at that time during the campaign. Journalists from Delhi, from Bombay came in such a large numbers to see what was going on there. It was a very important place.
I mean, it's quite literally front page news.
Exactly. So it had repercussions, and the victory, the amazing victory in terms of margin of votes that she got, sealed the fate of secularism to some extent, because it's very difficult now to claim that you're secular if you want to win elections.
So let me ask you, on this issue of secularism, it was not really a feature at all of the Congress Party campaign. The word secularism, it seems, was kind of a four-letter word that has been tainted and tarnished, and something that the traditional so-called secular parties felt very defensive about. Why do you think secularism was not a primary feature, and do you think that it can be reclaimed? And if so, will it be a new brand of secularism, like different from the Nehruvian construct, or does that still have another life to live?
Well, if it has to be reinvented, it will take a long time, because secularism is indeed in a very bad shape in terms of, you can say, value system. We are living in the age of majoritarianism, and it's not only in India. The core group, the sons of the soil, the majority, is now the vote bank of so many populist parties, national populist parties. And BJP is only one among so many others. AKP in Turkey, Likud in Israel, the list is so long. So the idea now is to develop a kind of ethnic democracy. There is democracy for the majority. The majority is bound to rule, and competition is within these limits. Minorities are bound to become second-class citizens, and they may be second-class citizens de jure in some places like Israel, or de facto the way Muslims and Christians are now finding a new place for them, so to speak, in India. To change this narrative, to return to something more secular, we will have to see the resurrection of a non-identity-based repertoire, and it can only be a socio-economic or a caste-based repertoire, which may come back. There is no doubt that inequalities are increasing in India. The resentment of the people, the masses, is there. For the moment, this resentment has been diverted towards nationalism, vis-à-vis Pakistan, vis-à-vis the minorities. But how long can people be happy with only this compensation? And the moment they will ask for their due, they will turn to the rulers of the country, who, by the way, come from the elite. This is the irony of populism. The populist says, I am with the people against the elite, but he becomes the elite. Sometimes he is from the elite.
Well, this is the great irony of our current president, Donald J. Trump, isn't it?
Same.
That he comes from literally a gilded throne in a gilded apartment in the penthouse of Midtown Manhattan building to represent the masses.
Yeah, and to say that I am against the elite is true in the sense that he is not from the same elite, but he's from another elite. And that's a very commonplace scenario. We saw that in Italy with Berlusconi many years ago. We see this today in Pakistan with Imran Khan, certainly not coming from the political elite, but not being from the people either.
That's right.
So the populist has this skill to sell an anti-establishment repertoire in spite of being from some elite group himself. And there is a limit to that, because at one point of time, if he doesn't deliver, the people he claims to speak, in the name of which he claims to speak, can ask for some accountability. And that may bring class, poverty back in the agenda, a secular agenda.
So speaking of bringing things back, the question is, can the Congress Party be brought back? This is not just a major election defeat, Christophe. It's two major election defeats. We see enduring questions about Rahul Gandhi, about his leadership, about the support within the party for his remaining at the top. But it's not only about leadership. It's also about ideology. When you have secularism somewhat discredited, when you have welfarism adopted by the BJP to essentially take your main election plank and throw it back against you, there's a question of where the Congress goes. How do you see the fortunes of the Congress kind of playing out?
Well, there are two things there. The first is, it's not as if Congress was eradicated the way BJP wanted to eradicate.
Right, as a Congress Mukt Bharat.
Exactly. They wanted a Congress-free India. And that was the objective 5 years ago. It remains a very remote prospect. No, because Congress is still entrenched in many states, where it is still the main opponent to BJP, and where it has won state elections. Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Punjab are ruled by Congress. In Gujarat, they lost in 2017 with a very small margin. So at that level, at the state level, Congress is still resilient. And it's also true at the local level. The decoupling of the elections, the national elections, the general elections, and the local elections is absolutely spectacular. Some people have voted for Modi, to have Modi in New Delhi, and for Congress at the local level on the same day. In Karnataka, very clearly that was the dominant behavior, because Congress swept the poll in the municipal elections and lost 26 out of 27 seats at the Lok Sabha. So that's a very important point to make. They have parties which can remain, which can survive at the local level. Incidentally, it is true in many other countries. In France, the Swiss party is a party of mayors. They still control many cities, but they have absolutely no representation at the center. A party can be revived from that, you can say, crucible of local politics. The other thing to say is that we've seen in the past that the opposition is voted in because the rulers are voted out. The credibility of Janata Party in 1977 was not that great, but everybody wanted to get rid of Indira Gandhi in northern India. So it was a vote against the ruler. You can't rule that out. Of course, till Narendra Modi is at the helm of BJP, it is very unlikely. But people precisely have voted for Narendra Modi, not for BJP this time. And we have many surveys saying that, well, if Modi had not been the BJP candidate, we would not have supported the BJP MP in the constituency. So that may be a remote prospect, but the resilience of Congress at the local level may make it possible for the party to be revived at the national level when some opportunity appears.
Well, I mean, precisely to bring the Indira Gandhi analogy back is that, if Modi's popularity were to dip for any reason, economic crisis or some other crisis, then the BJP is in quite a vulnerable position because he and Amit Shah have remade the party in their mold. So now the two brands are somewhat synonymous. So if one takes a hit, logic will tell you that the other one would also go down. Let me end this conversation by asking you about caste and caste-based parties. The claim has been made that when you look at how the caste-based parties of the Hindi belt did this time, that the electorate is exhausted with the Mandal parties, with the parties which came to power on the back of the Mandal mobilization in the 1980s and 1990s. Do you believe that we have, in fact, entered a post-Mandal era in which the mobilization styles, the kinds of appeals to social justice, to caste that these parties made, has now run its course? Or is this a pendulum that has swung in one direction, but it might well, swing the other way?
Well, it's a very interesting subject because on the one hand, yes, we have shifted from the Mandal moment to something different, and for two reasons. The Mandal moment meant that parties saying, vote for me, you'll get quota. That would work. Quotas have reached their saturation point. You can't say it anymore. That's caste-based quotas at their maximum level. So Mandal is over. Mandal is also over for another reason. BJP, the national populism of Hindutva, is the best way for the upper caste to stage a comeback. And we see that in the parliament of today. When you vote for BJP, the subtext is that you vote for upper caste politicians. It's fascinating to see that BJP has not renominated 100 outgoing MPs out of 282, which is a huge percentage. But the new nominated candidates were also from upper caste. So we have now something like 40% of the North Indian members of parliament coming from the upper caste, Brahmins and Rajputs being the most overrepresented caste groups. So Mandal is over because the low caste people are not as well represented as they used to be in the 90s, till 2004-9 at least. So we are back in terms of the sociology of the parliament to the 80s, to the pre-Mandal movement. But that does not mean that caste is not playing a role in politics. Far from that. And BJP may claim that, they pay no attention to caste, they are absolutely above caste, caste is such a dividing category, blah, blah, blah. In practice, they know the caste arithmetic of each constituency, and they are very careful in the nomination of their candidates. For instance, in Uttar Pradesh, the largest state of India, 80 seats out of 544, they have made sure, they have been very particular about giving tickets, nominating non-Yadav low-caste candidates. Because the Yadav are the most influential low-caste groups, and they have, of course, attracted the resentment of the other low-caste groups, which cannot have access to the quotas because of the Yadavs. The Yadavs are cornering the quotas, the 27% of the posts that are reserved for the OBCs in the public service, public sector. So they have, in a way, polarized the caste groups to their benefit because the non-Yadav supported massively BJP, and that's one of the reasons why they won in so many seats. Same with the Dalits for the scheduled caste. They made a point to give tickets to non-Jatav candidates. And again, the data are cornering most of the reservations for the Dalits, and therefore the non-Jadavs are very much resentful. What does it tell us? It tells us that caste politics is very much alive, but it works at the Jati level now, at the sub-caste level. Mandal was an exceptional moment when all these groups joined hands in the framework of big categories, amalgamating all the Jatis. OBCs was something that was meaningful. This is over. But caste politics is not over.
So in other words, the larger categories of Dalit, of OBC, no longer are salient because the fight or the differentiation is really happening at the Jati level within OBCs and within SCs, and that is what the BJP has been able to exploit in its political mobilization. I want to ask you one last question about the new frontiers for the BJP. This election, we saw them make inroads into the east, in West Bengal and Odisha. Aside from Karnataka, they have very little hold in the south. They won a few seats in Telangana, not much more. After a lot of talk, very little gains in Kerala, in Tamil Nadu, in Andhra Pradesh. Are we seeing a clear north-south divide? Or is there a way in which, because of national populism and because of the charisma of Narendra Modi and because of the organization and because of the money and all the other factors that you mentioned, that the South too could soon fall in line and we will see more saffron appearing, when we look at our electoral maps in the South?
Well, it's difficult to say, but if BJP was to make inroads in the South, it should have happened by now. After so many years of propaganda, it's not as if Hindutva forces were not represented in these states. In Kerala, RSS has a very dense network of workers. So they are there, but it is not translating into votes. And I think it is a reflection of this divide, the North-South divide. Hindutva politics is still associated with Hindi, the language of the North. It's also associated with Brahminism somewhat.
And where in the South you saw anti-Brahminical movements take root much earlier than you did in the North.
Exactly. The Dravidians were also resisting not only to the North, to the invaders from the North, but also to the Brahmins, to the upper caste people. So this gives some hope to the state parties, and there are many state parties. In fact, Congress is only very important in Kerala these days. But in Tamil Nadu, in Andhra Pradesh, in Telangana, we may see these state parties representing a regional identity, resisting the North. And BJP will be very cautious. They want to impose Hindi on everybody, but they will probably taste water many times before doing it in the South, not to alienate the South.
My guest today is Christophe Jaffrelot. He is the editor of two new books on India. One is called The Majoritarian State, and the other is Business and Politics in India. Christophe, it's an absolute pleasure to speak with you and hope to see you soon.
Yeah, thank you.
Grant the Masha is a co-production of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and the Hindustan Times. You can find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to rate and review. It helps others find the show more easily. For more information about the show and to find the writing we referenced on this week's episode, visit our website, grantthemasha.com. Production assistance comes from Megan Maxwell and Rachel Osnos. Tim Martin is our audio engineer, and Lauren Dueck is our executive producer. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.